Good morning. Remembering 9/11. It's been 3 years since the worst terrorist attacks ever on American soil, killing 2,749 people in the Twin Towers in New York, 189 people at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and 40 people in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Somber ceremonies are being held all around the country to honor the victims and comfort those who lost loved ones. Today, Saturday, September 11th, 2004.
From NBC News, this is Today, live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
Welcome, everyone. It is a day of mourning and remembrance from Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan, the site where the World Trade Center once proudly stood.
To Arlington National Cemetery, where a wreath-laying ceremony will be held later this morning at the 9/11 Memorial there, to Pennsylvania, and the temporary memorial that now stands in the place where the United Flight 93 crashed on that fateful and terrible day. And thanks for joining us, everyone, on this Saturday morning. I'm Campbell Brown.
And I'm Lester Holt. And a day that we reflect on how much our nation and our world has changed in the last 3 years. There will be a moment of silence observed at each of the sites at the exact time the planes crashed into the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and, of course, the plane that went down in Shanksville. We'll have all that coming up this morning.
And then I'm going to talk to Secretary of State Colin Powell about where the war on terrorism now stands, and he'll answer the question about whether Osama bin Laden will ever be held responsible for what happened on September 11th. We'll also get reaction from former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani about how the city has changed and coped with repeated terror alerts and warnings over the last 3 years.
Campbell, there's another huge story we're following this morning, the hurricane named Ivan. Ivan's currently a strong Category 4 storm, packing powerful and extremely dangerous winds of nearly 150 miles per hour. And just like Charlie and Francis before him, it could threaten parts of Florida early next week. Our correspondents are once again in place to track the hurricane. We begin in Jamaica, where Ivan first hit last night.
I guess that means flooding could be a huge problem for you.
Yes, most definitely.
Let's get a look at the rest of the morning's headlines now. Rob Morrison is at the news desk with us. Hi, Rob.
Good morning, Campbell. Lester, good morning, everyone. Today will be a day of remembrance at Ground Zero in New York, at the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. NBC's Ron Allen is live in Lower Manhattan this morning with more on today's ceremony. Ron, good morning. What's planned for today?
Good morning, Rob. It is a glorious, clear, cool, and very solemn morning here at Ground Zero. The crowds will begin to form over the next hour or so for a ceremony set to begin around 8:40. This year, the parents and grandparents of those lost will play a prominent role, reading the names of the 2,749 heroes and victims who were lost here. Readings that will pause for 4 moments of silence at 8:46 and 9:03, the 2 moments when the plane struck the World Trade Center towers, and then again at 9:59 and 10:29, the 2 moments when the towers collapsed. Church bells will toll throughout the city during that procession of names. The relatives and survivors will be able to descend to the lowest point here at Ground Zero to pay their respects and lay flowers in the footprint of the World Trade Center site. The last time that they'll be able to do that for some time, because much is changing here at Ground Zero. A lot of construction is already underway. Back on July 4th, the cornerstone for Freedom Tower was laid, the soaring 1,776-foot tall skyscraper, one of several to be built here, as well as the memorial reflecting absence also has been designed and is starting to take shape. But for today, it is a very emotional and solemn event, a time for loved ones to grieve, mourn, reflect, and hopefully draw strength as they try to move on and deal with what happened here 3 years ago. Rob, back to you.
NBC's Ron Allen in Lower Manhattan. Thank you. Members of the 9/11 Commission say airline security has improved over the past 3 years, but more progress is needed. Members of the commission spoke exclusively with MSNBC's Chris Matthews about problems that can arise when pilots leave the cockpit.
I know it sounds so infantile, but isn't that the vulnerability? You're laughing, Richard, but isn't that what it is? Pilots have to leave the cockpit when they do, that door opens.
Well, you know, the 9/11 hijackers gamed us. They studied the procedures, and they recognized that the most vulnerable point in the flight was just after takeoff, when that cockpit door opened. Well, presumably, that has changed now, and that there are other steps in place. But you're right. there are vulnerabilities, but there's a much greater heightened sense of security now. And is it perfect? No.
And a programming note, that special edition of Hardball will re-air on MSNBC tomorrow at noon. Former President Bill Clinton is out of the hospital and back home in Chappaqua, New York. The 58-year-old former president underwent a quadruple bypass operation on Monday. A military intelligence analyst has been sentenced in connection with the Abu Ghraib prison abuse case. Specialist Armin Cruz of Plano, Texas, entered a guilty plea to charges of conspiracy and mistreatment of prisoners. He's been sentenced to 8 months in prison, a reduction in rank, and a dishonorable discharge. And that's the latest news. Now back to Lester and Campbell.
Thanks, Rob. And now for more on the hurricane and what's going on everywhere else in the country.
Yeah,
Steve McLaughlin.
It's going to be another busy weekend. Good morning, Campbell. To Lester, good morning to you, everyone. Ivan continues to be a powerful, dangerous Category 4 hurricane, passing now just to the south of Jamaica, about 70 miles south of Montego.
11 attacks. Secretary of State Colin Powell says despite his belief Osama bin Laden is still alive, Americans are safer than they were before September 11th happened. I sat down with the Secretary in Washington on Friday and asked him to explain why.
Well, we haven't had it.
And reassurance in the chaotic days just after September 11th for New Yorkers and the entire country. Former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Mayor, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
If I could begin on a personal note, will this day ever become easier for you? Messages, but first, this is Today on NBC.
What does it take?